Hello, everybody. This is Matthew Brand. Welcome to the Magna Creed Podcast. And today I want to talk about how you may find yourself in self-defense situations. What I mean by that is if you look at the self-defense community or firearms community, different things along those lines, when they give advice, talk about how not to fall prey to certain things, they're typically, and this is no offense, but they're typically giving it from the perspective of a white, suburban, probably middle to upper middle class male. Sometimes female. They vary a little bit on that. But it's typically not given from the perspective of people who may live in bad situations already or go through a bad area on a daily basis. It's just one of those things. Now, certainly, the reason for that is because a lot of self-defense, a lot of the self-defense community revolves around firearms, and when you expand that, firearms are very expensive, so it's not something that a lot of people can afford. Many people can afford one or two if you budget correctly, but when it comes to all the training that they're typically selling, right? It's not something that you can really afford. This was something that kind of went on in the dating community too. If anybody's familiar with pickup artists or anything along those lines, one of the common thing with pickup artists is they're not really targeting your average Joe who's just getting his life together or going through college and stuff like that. They're typically targeting people who are upper middle class or higher who have the finances to take their classes. Sometimes, if a person who isn't doing well is willing to purchase their class, they'll still pay for it. But even people who are doing really well kind of give one of those Simpsons at the price of some of those things. So those are things to take into consideration. If you're going through a high level of training, if you're going through a training for competition, getting very expensive guns, traveling, doing all such things, these things cost a lot of money, and it can be cost prohibitive, just like something such as golf or other such things, depending on the area you live in, your financial situation, or just how busy your lifestyle is. So a lot of people miss out on that training. However, knowing the type of clientele they're typically targeting, they aim the information towards them. Obviously, when you're giving out broad information over the internet or maybe even to a class of 50 people in person, you have to kind of broad stroke it, and it doesn't tailor to each situation. I'll give you a little example myself. I said, okay, what happens if you're going through bad area? These people group around your car. The police amply reply, and this was a casual situation. Nothing was, wasn't a heated debate, or I wasn't getting pulled over, and we were sitting down together in a training situation. However, they said, well, don't be in that situation. don't go there. Here's the deal, though. My grandmother lives there, and this is a true thing. My grandmother, for a good chunk of my life, as both of my grandmothers on each side of the family have lived in very, very, very bad areas, and I have no financial means to put them in much better ones. As a matter of fact, we did put one of my grandmothers in a better area once we were doing better in life. But if that's your grandmother, right? If your grandmother's in a really bad area, it's a good chance that their kids, which will be my parents, weren't the best to do in the world either. And if they're not the best to do in the world, you're starting off a little behind. Now, each generation you tend to do a little better, hopefully, tend to end up doing a little better, but it doesn't mean you have the financial security to take care of everybody in your family. So if you have family that live in a bad area, or you yourself live in a bad area, you can't use the information. Don't go in those areas, because that's where you live. And they have what they call the rule of stupid, right? The 3 rules of stupid. Don't go with stupid people in stupid places at stupid times. Well, unfortunately, if your life demands that, there's not really much you can do. If you're a poor person And then I posted something on my Facebook page about a Lyft driver, but your poor person doing a Lyft driving. That's basically all of those grouped together in an unfortunate circumstance that there's nothing really else you can do about it. A riot is often considered a stupid place with stupid people at a stupid time. And yes, if you choose to willingly go to a riot, that is bad. But if you just so happen to live in that area, you may want to bunker down for the night, maybe miss a meal, grab some McDonald's in another area on your way home. But if that's not necessarily an option for you, sometimes you get wrapped up in things. And unfortunately, these are things we have to take into consideration when we're advising people. And it's often the, the go-to response is, well, just live in a different area. Or what's it worth to you to this? Those are blanket responses for people of so many different situations. People have millions of different situations. You can't blanket statement all of them. So one of the things I try to address is that people have different circumstances. It's inevitable. So instead of looking for everybody to be in the same circumstance, what we can maybe do is look at different situations and tailor our responses to those particular situations. For example, I know, or I shouldn't say I know, but how about this? I know that there are people who are big time criminals. And sometimes these criminals, or these known criminals at least, have people who have something against them. That doesn't always stop at that particular criminal. It may target another family member who has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the crime. And I could be completely misinformed on this, but I could also go for celebrities too, people who are just making it. I call it that awkward growth phase. If you have when I was younger, I never really wanted to have braids when they were popular because I get like this Good Times ugly afro or half-fro, whatever, the Steve Harvey looking thing. Like, oh, yeah, that's right. If you're white, you not know this, but Steve Harvey used to have hair for a good chunk of his career when he was more popular with black people than with, more mainstream, right? Before he was more mainstream. So Steve Harvey had like a half-fro. Good Times, all those. They had these half-fro kind of hair, and I found it very unappealing. And that's how my hair grows. Didn't want it, but if it got longer, it was okay. But in that awkward growth phase, like right in the middle, no one likes it. That's why nobody likes middle school. That's why nobody likes puberty, all that kind of stuff. Well, that also happens with finances. Very often you may find yourself in this awkward growth phase where things aren't as appealing as they could be. And it sometimes feels more dangerous because people may know you have money or you're starting to get money, but you haven't afforded enough to live outside of that situation that you currently lived in. If you live in a, let's say, bad area and you start making money, okay, you're doing better. You may not even be showy-offy about the money, but there are going to be people around in your community who know you have a decent job. There'll be people around in your community that know you bring home a decent paycheck. It's something to consider. So that is one reason people end up getting into this. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but right now I'm smoking the Alec and Bradley. I should specify the Alec and Bradley because Alec Bradley is their father's brand that he named after them. Alec and Bradley Blind Faith, because this has been a insanely terrible, and it could always be worse, but it's been a very terrible month. Or a month span, right? The month isn't even over yet, but ever since December, it's just been kicking my butt. I've had health issues. My son's had health issues. His I have a co-parent, and his other family has had health issues. And since mine was, I would say, less contagious, I've been really working myself around trying to take care of myself, take care of him, take care of the home, just do all kinds of things, work get stuff done. So this is just something to keep in mind. Sometimes you just pray and you believe in God and hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And that's really what a lot of this is about, right? If you think about it, when you're doing, really, to make that loud noise right now, anyway, and I'm recording. So, if you really think about it, a lot of times, yes, you can try to prevent things, you can try to prepare for things, but really a lot of it is faith in that at the end of the day, things are going to be okay, no matter really what happens. You really got to push past that. So, yeah, awkward growth phase is the reason a lot of people end up targeted. Another reason people end up targeted a lot is just because, happenstance. That's usually what the suburban people, when they're making these, and I'm not insulting suburban, I live in the suburbs, nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that the information, the advice is tailored to people who also fit into that category. Where there's, once again, a broad spectrum of situations. And with a lot of suburban people, what you're really getting is they're worried about a few certain things. One, going to the ATM being robbed, right? Two, they're worried about being in the wrong place. Like, let's say if you live in Metro Detroit. A lot of the places right outside Detroit are really nice and have next to no crime. Like, next to none. In Detroit, as many people know all around the world, is very high in crime. If you're driving through the city, you're usually on the freeway, there's no issue, right? You may go downtown, watch a baseball game, basketball game, come back home. But people are worried about maybe even passing through or something, their car breaking down or getting lost on the side streets, having to go get gas in the wrong neighborhood. And then when they have to do that, the people who aren't from the city they're terrified of those situations. And then when you have people from the self-defense community hammering that into them, that's what they should be prepared for. Not that there's anything wrong with being prepared for that. I would prepare for it too, but it's just, it creates this narrow well. But that is something that does happen. People do go to areas they're unfamiliar with. They don't recognize how crazy or bad or messed up some people are in those areas, and they get taken advantage of, they get robbed, they get targeted. It's just something that happens, and sometimes they get killed. It's just something that happens, and you may be, the king of the good old boys where you come from, but in that area, people have another thing for you. You know what I mean? They don't have the same morality. And a lot of people's morality are graced by this living situation they had. In the city, rules, unfortunately, and I'm not putting police down at all, but you do have to recognize that in the city, there's a culture of handling things by yourself, right? Mainly, a lot of it is because the police used to pretty much not come. Not saying the police are bad, I think they were maybe spread thin, or, they had to prioritize emergencies, just different stuff. Things that people are complaining about in, other places now that are just happening now that they did the defund the police thing. That was always an issue in Detroit. So people have always had a culture of dealing with things themselves. Calling the police is an imaginary notion. I remember sometime within the year, this famous burger place in the city, Detroit, I don't even know what happened or why, but there were people working there. For whatever reason, some of the customers started attacking them, and they had to basically barricade themselves in the door. They called the police, but the police never came. Another issue was a security guard who, there was a shooting, but basically she got mad, or one of the customers got mad. And this happens very often, by the way. There's a girl who was slighted in some way, so she calls her boyfriend, who's maybe a criminal or very violent, to come up and handle the situation. Well, that then leads to, somebody getting hurt. And this one situation in Flint, it was a security guard who died. A lot of people knew that security guard, thought he was the sweetest guy in the world. All he did was tell them to put a mask on. Another situation, it was a lady who was being belligerent at the store and was asked to leave. Same thing, except it resulted in the other one. They were the ones who ended up getting attacked because once again, the police didn't show up quick enough. It happens. It happens very, very frequently. Many people, even if they do call the police may show up and be like, "What do you want us to do?" Nothing we can really do about it. Was not even $1,000. We've got bigger fish to fry. It's just the case. Sometimes you get people on video evidence with everything, and still nothing comes of it. I remember there was a guy. I think he's famous on some type of social media platform. His mother got robbed in the city coming back from a baseball game. They got the video evidence of the guy. They got him using the credit card. They got everything. He got right back out. Most of these people are repeat offenders. You have this one woman who what did she do? The guy stole her car. And she tracked him down, called the police, and the police took too long to show up. She tracked him down again. Same thing. Police took too long to show up. She tracked him down a third time or more, and she slashed her own tires, the car that he was driving, and then found him in the store and gave him what for. There's a little legal haziness, but what is he going to say? Oh, man, she hit me for stealing her car. I mean, I'm not condoning that, but that is the thing you have to consider. That is basically what is going on in a lot of cities. Not just Detroit, obviously, but in a lot of cities. People are finding that they have to handle things themselves, which raises a really strong question that I'll bring up in another episode. But what do you do when the police are null and void? Unfortunately, we have weird laws that kind of make it so that if the police are null and void, we're not really allowed to do anything either. Some places do have laws, but they're not so clear cut that I don't know how to explain it, but they're not so clear cut that they address something reasonable, like a reasonable response. So obviously what happened in the Ahmaud Arbery case was disgusting and disgraceful, and those men should, I mean, in my opinion, they should rot. But when you have other situations like I forgot, there was like a black guy caught somebody like trying to, some weird, I don't know, white dude trying to steal his car, and he held him at gunpoint on the ground until the police showed up. Unfortunately, there is a huge discrepancy depending on what state, city, county you're in on whether or not you can do that. Do I think anything he did was wrong? No. But it could definitely be frowned upon, and some people are like, dude, just let him take your car, it's just a car. Well, to some people, their car is everything. If they lose their car, they lose everything financially that they have, which is another situation that I want to allude to, that people in these, I want to say these suburban centered gun channels don't really allude to. They say, well, if it's property, you should just let them take it. Okay, and some people feel that way, and to be completely honest, I understand where they're coming from. Property is not as valuable as a human life. It never is, and unless it's going to kill, I mean, depending on what you're taking from somebody, it may be their life, but unless it's causing you death or great bodily harm by taking that property, or in the means you take that property, it is not worth taking a human life over. However, you do still have to accept that to some people, what you're taking is worth dying for. And that's where another, a lot of situations occur, right? Even when it doesn't make sense. Even when it's not like, oh man, if you do this, I'm broken out of it. For example, let's say you get a little fender bender, a little bumperooski, right? And this happened to me before. You bump somebody's car, they get out, they demand cash. Hey man, you just scratched my car, I want $4,000. You're like, no, I'll let the insurance handle it. They might not even have insurance. they, they might not even be willing to call it. They want their money, and they're like a JG Wentworth commercial. I I want my cash now, right? So this is something to think about, and these little slights that people feel, right? It may not even be property. It might be respect. It may be something that you just really care about. A woman, a man, something along those lines, right? You get messed with this woman's girlfriend or her wife, or this man's wife, or this. Honestly, I've never seen two dudes fight over a boyfriend, but I've seen a girl fight over another girl. I've seen a guy fight over a girl. I've seen lots of girls fight over guys. So don't know which one is more common. Like I said, I've never seen a dude fight over another dude. But just because I ain't seen it doesn't mean it's not there. I'm sure it happens often enough. My point is that I personally know that these are things that happen. And sometimes we don't teach people to avoid that, right? We don't teach people to, like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do this thing that makes other people very, very angry. Yeah, it's illegal. For what are they going to do about it? Anything they do about it will be illegal. Not everybody is so concerned about legality. This is something you have to understand. Which is why robbery exists. This is why murder exists. There's domestic violence. All these stuff. None of it is legal. People do illegal stuff all the time, right? Think about how long adult videos were illegal. You think people weren't watching those? Think how long infidelity was illegal. You think people weren't doing that? People do illegal stuff. Weed is still, even if it's legal in your state, it's still federally illegal. If you have a medical marijuana card, you can't go buy a firearm. You're considered the same as a crackhead, essentially. It's something to really do. Like, I think it's the same scheduled as LSD. All right, it's ridiculous, right? It's absolutely ridiculous. It's something you really got to think about. Some people are willing to die and kill for things that you don't find that important, for things that you be like, oh well, there's nothing I can do about it. You just feel hurt. And I know that there are people out there who, not, I don't want to say specialize, but have enjoy. They enjoy poking at people, knowing that there's, in situations where they know that there's nothing they can do about it. I see it a lot, and to be completely honest, it happens a lot in the suburbs. When I lived in the city, people wouldn't dare do that because, not saying it never happens, people don't screw with you. I'm not saying people don't have a sense of humor, but the level to which people will do stuff to you in the suburbs, knowing that you can't do anything about it, it's like part of the culture. In some sort, not all suburbs, right? But it's part of the culture, like that. What they call that, boys will be boys, good old boys culture. Sometimes it's girls too. They just do stuff, the horrible stuff, the most horrible things they can come up with. They'll do that to you until something eventually happens. Like, I knew one dude. Man, I think he used to put baloney on, like, mess up people's cars because he thought it was funny. Their car that they spent thousands of dollars on, that they spent hard work. He'd just go out there and screw up the entire paint job for giggles. Now think of it. Just be honest with yourself. If you took that exact same person and had them do that to somebody in the city, right, or somebody from a culture where they don't put up with that, regardless of the legality, what do you think is going to happen to him? Exactly what eventually happened to him. And he blamed it on, oh well, these certain types of people are extremely aggressive. You could consider that. You also have to consider that not everybody's culture fits into your bubble of morality. A lot of people have a bubble of everything they believe is moral. And different people have different beliefs. I knew a guy who wouldn't step on an ant. He'd feed them before he stepped on them. Right? Obviously, everybody doesn't have that level of morality. And I shouldn't even be considered a level of morality, but doesn't live in that area of morality. They have different views. It's different. And when you step on someone else's and they don't have the same level of morality you do, you get violent conflict very often. And last one, really, a lot of times is injustice, revenge. Some people call it street revenge or whatever. Those are situations you also get in. Feuding neighbors, you get people who they, let's you did something to them. They tried to handle it the right way. It didn't work, so they're going to handle it the wrong way. They're just mad. They're angry. They're angry at the world. They might even be mad at you. You just might resemble the person, or they're just mad at the last person who slighted them, and you fit the category. They're mad at women, or they're mad at men, or they're mad at their, mother or something, right? This happens, and should be looking to read people to figure out how to work with people like that, because unfortunately there's so many people like that. It's very unlikely that you're going to be able to just avoid them. This is just the fact of the matter. You're just going to have a hard time avoiding them, because everybody's typically been slighted by someone, and as they get older that builds up. It's just a matter of fact, right? Look at our divorce rate. It's what, 50, 60%. There you go. You got a huge grove of bitter people walking around for one reason or another. So it's just things to think about. These are reasons people get into these conflicts. It's not just because you're strolling down the street or at the wrong gas station and somebody targeted you because you weren't paying enough attention, right? Sometimes it does happen. Sometimes you just run into crazy people. It does. It is an occurrence. You just run into people who are just crazy. I was going down somewhere, going to the store, I was coming back from the store. There's a dude who's just walking around, stripping all his clothes off, throwing it in the garbage. It happens. He didn't do anything to anybody, but it was very awkward. Thinking, there's kids around who could see this guy. All right, you get out of the situation, but what are you going to do about it? There's crazy around. There are people who are dope sick. There are people who have all kinds of mental issues and everything. It's just things to consider. It's not just about being able to get the fastest draw on somebody who's going to jump your car. There are other things going on besides that. And once again, if you live depending on your situation, you may prepare differently. If you're let's say a relative or close to somebody who sells, drugs, or has made a lot of enemies, right? You may want to get somebody or something that is protective, right? You may want to get something a little bigger for the house. You may want an AR-15, or you may want to make sure you get like a shotgun that holds more than just a few rounds, right? It's just something to consider if you're just concerned with, okay, I may go through a bad area. I go through a bad area every day on my way to work. You might want to carry something on you that's easy to, in the setup that's easy to access, because most likely if something bad ever does happen, it will be because of a road rage incident, or because they're coming for your car or whatever. Not very many people are always looking to rob you. This is the number one thing that most people in self-defense, like these scenarios, I don't want to say they scare you with, but they focus on, is robbery. Oh, this guy's a robber, this guy's a robber, this guy's a robber. The reason robberies are focused on so much is because robberies are the ones that are going to be most often caught on camera, right? Those are the ones that get talked about the most because there's video evidence. It's in people's face. They can't deny that it just happened, right? The guy comes in with a crowbar, smashing everything up, saying, "Give me the money," right? And it's all on video. You can't deny that. It's in your face. But people go through self-defense situations every single day, multiple times a day, dozens of times, in an area, like even a small area, not like a city, a small section of a city, it will experience dozens of self-defense encounters all the time. Even suburbs experience those types of things all the time. It just so happens that those things don't get talked about very often. And it's not always violent, it doesn't always involve a gun. That's why a lot of times on my, if you look at my Facebook thing, I share stabbings because there are other things out there besides people robbing you with a gun. Now, if someone's trying to stab you, is it handy to have a gun? Yes, it is. But we, like I said again, we're very focused on a very specific type of thing because we're trying to sell training, right? And that's, I mean, I'm a trainer too. If you live in Michigan, you want a CPL, you can contact me. I'll do it for very affordable rates, right? But the point is, it's not about that. The point is, what you're really looking to do is help people understand what's really going on. And a lot of times we just really focus on home invasions, robberies. That's not the sum of everything. And it paints a vivid picture that everybody can be like focused on and worried about. Some people say, oh, well, that's never happened. That's very unlikely to happen. No, it was like very likely enough to happen. Home invasions happen enough. Even the home invasion situation, if you want to talk about how home invasions very often happen, there are people, you'll get them, they're creepers. They'll drive down the street real slow, trying to get an ideal or picture of whose cars are there during the day, right? How many people live on this block during the day? Is there anybody home? When do they leave for work? And what may happen more often than not, maybe you have one car for two people. Let's say you have a husband and wife, but you share a car. Or, there is no car. Somebody, walks to work or something like that. Or you both have left for work, right? But they'll take that as a sign, hey, no one's home, I'm going to kick the door in. This is why it very often happens when women are home. I notice a lot of times women are home during home invasions, right? More than, both like a couple. Sometimes you get a couple, right? If it's late at night and they follow you into the house. So some robbers do that. They'll follow you into the house. If you have a nice car, you live in a gated community, whatever, that you stay, they'll follow you in. And these things usually happen because a couple of reasons. One, someone knows you have something they want. That's a big thing. Someone knows you have something they want. Number two, if you, I don't know how to explain it, but if you look like you leave at a certain time every day, they might just random target your house, right? That's the second one. Or greed, and I know this sounds sad, but it's a relative. It's someone maybe not a relative, it might be a friend or something like that. They know when you're at work, they know when you're home, they know where you live, and they have maybe an idea that you may have some stuff in your house. I know this one guy, he invited some people wanted to hang out with him. They asked if they could come over, hang out with him at his house. They know he never does it. He's like, okay, all right, you can come over to my house. So they came over, found out where he lived. They left. When they, and when he went to work or wasn't there, and they took that opportunity to steal all his watch collection. He had a really nice watch collection that he worked a long time to acquire. He was so hurt by that. And it's very common. I also knew a person who was a former Marine out in the, I want to say the northern U.S. suburbs. He had a gun collection. I don't think for hunting or anything, but he had a gun collection, and one of his friends had got addicted to heavy drugs and decided he was going to steal his gun collection. Now, the deal is he knew who it was, but it still happens, right? It's still an occurrence. So the best thing you can do for that, make sure you have cameras. Dogs, it depends on the dog, I would really say. Like, if you don't have the right kind of dog, the dog's not trained for that, don't expect Fido to up and do something just because they're home, right? And they're like, oh, this guy's obviously a robber, let me bite him on the patootie. Like, they're going to be like, Did you bring cookies? Everybody else that comes over brings cookies. I don't think he brought cookies. That's all your dog's thinking about, right? So, if they're not trained to, do anything. So, something to consider. Another thing, if your wife stays at home when you leave, man, there are some definite things out there where these people have gotten, their wives have gotten assaulted, their kids, stuff, just because, they left for work, someone thought nobody was home, they bust in the door, and then you have the wife who, not saying that some women can't handle themselves, but some people aren't prepared to, man or woman, and they just sit there crying and, yeah, for whatever reason, just get the crap beat out of them. There's one video where this woman, she got the crap beat out of her right in front of her kid and then got thrown down the stairs for good measure. It, before being robbed, it's sickening. But it does happen. So I'm not saying these things don't happen. But usually there's a story around it. And once you hear the story, you're like, okay, I see. I don't believe it should have happened. It's a tragedy, but it's not surprising once you hear the whole story, right? Okay, guy going to a ATM machine, wasn't paying attention or went to an ATM machine in the bad part of town, whatever the case may be. You hear these stories, it never really sounds surprising. They lived in Brazil. Doesn't sound surprising, right? It happens, right? You get these moto robbers and all kinds of different stuff. You don't want it to happen to anybody. You don't want it to happen to you. Prepare yourself, but just think when you're listening to these online self-defense gurus, they have very valuable information. Almost always. Even if you don't like them as a person, you can still sometimes suck good, valuable information from people, even if you don't care. Even if you want to know what the opposite side thinks, right? You can get good information from them. But sometimes you have to understand where their target demographic is. That's not a bad thing. They're business people. They focus on certain things. I knew certain people who I'm going to admit, whether you feel it's racist or not, they open shops that target black people. They're not black, but they'll open shops to target black people in black areas, knowing that black people tend to shop at those types of those types of stores. It's just the type of demographic where when they open a store in the suburb, the stores they open are like not even the same franchise, right? Completely different, because people in those areas like different stuff. You gotta focus on your demographic. You can't, if you broad stroke things too much, it makes it harder to make money. And the problem with the people in the self-defense community, or I shouldn't say the problem, but the reason they're focusing on this is because these are the people with the money who are going to take their training. If you are barely making $20 to your name, you are not going out to fly to California or Arizona and take these people's training that costs $100 a day and come back, feeling like, man, I can draw my weapon way better than I used to now. A lot of training they put out there for free for people who can't afford to go and do all that. But it's on the basics and the fundamentals. And sometimes they have a little advanced stuff in there, but to sum it up, they usually focuses around weapons. And a lot of people can't afford ammo to continue to shoot. Sometimes they put out dry fire stuff out there. That's a good idea too. And mental practices that you can put through your head, right? But unless you get a mentor or unless you get somebody who is more familiar with your situation, sometimes you're going to be at a loss taking advice from people who it can't really tailor to your situation. They're just going to be like, well, just try not to be in your situation. I can't tell you how many times when I live in a bad area, someone says, well, why don't you just move? Yeah, with that fat sack of millions of dollars I'm sitting on. That is really people's response. And it's very funny because I know there's a black lawyer who's in the self-defense community, and I would have him fit into that kind of suburban category, but he at least understands the situation. You can't just tell people, oh, if you live in a bad area, just move. It's not a reasonable solution. He even said this, I heard on a debate, when he debated somebody. And it's very funny because I heard two anti-gun debates Let me be very honest. I'm not anti-gun, but I heard two anti-gun debates or back and forth pro-gun, anti-gun debates before I heard that one. So three pro anti-gun debates in a day. I listened to three of them, and I will definitely say that the first two came off as extremely intelligent, right? Even though I didn't agree with their points, I heard and understood where they were coming from. I heard and understood where they were coming from, and they didn't bother me. I was thinking like, man, well, if it was them, making the focus and focuses on the laws and stuff like that, I will feel a little more comfortable. But the third guy, who was the one who was the actual lawmaker, he was the one who just sounded nuts. He just sounded crazy. I think they went back and forth over like who hunts with AR-15. Yeah, it was Coleon Noir, I think is the guy's name. I don't remember his real name, but he goes by Coleon Noir, and he's been all over TV and stuff like that. He was a face for the NRA for a long time because I think they tarnished their reputation with black people a bit. So I think they used him. He is a very well educated lawyer. Like, he's not an idiot, and he's I think he's friends with Killer Mike. Like, he's not completely removed either. But one thing I thought that was very interesting, he said, yeah, I hunt with an AR-15, which people do. He's like, you eat that meat? And he's like, yeah, why wouldn't I? The way it destroys flesh. He's like, that's what bullets do. An AR-15 is a 22. It's a fast 22, but it's a 22, right? As a matter of fact, most people wouldn't hunt a lot of animals with an AR-15 because it's not heavy enough of a bullet, right? It will leave an initial big impact, but it wouldn't penetrate very deep on a lot of animals, right? A lot of people use it as varmint rifles when they have the bigger, like the larger varmints, because if you have a large, I don't want to say large like kangaroo or emu large, right? That might be good for emus, but I mean more along the lines of, okay, boars, right? You have something that can also hurt you, right? Because a boar can do a lot of serious damage. I don't know if anybody's seen Game of Thrones, but boars can screw you up, right? They typically charge straight. This is a topic for another thing, but I'm not a big hunter, I'll admit that, but boars can hurt you. So we do have some wild boars in Michigan, even in the southeast, because there's a whole another story, but basically the farmers at some point pretty much released their pigs, and they transform into feral boars if left out in the wild. But basically, these boars can do damage to you, and if you have multiple boars, like you live in the area in the south where there's like boars are infestation, the way deer can be in northern Michigan. Yeah, I know a lot of people don't realize that, but deer can basically be an infestation in Michigan, where in other places the deer might be super far out before you shoot. Like, you're just shooting for a long distance to hit one. In Michigan, like, I go out to my car. I'm not even that far from Detroit, and then I'm like, here's two deer by my car. That's awkward, right? So it's just something to think about. Now, and if you have a violent, something that hurts you, and a deer can hurt you too, by the way. If you have they're a little more skittish, but if you have a buck will kill you. Some people don't realize that, right? But you have a buck or elk or something like that, they can kill you, right? Some people even have bears, get bears in their backyard. So if you have an animal that can murk you or do seriously bodily harm, right, which is what your gun is for, you don't want to be limited to what you do when you hunt, right? It's a difference between going out and you're pursuing the animal, and you have to deal with animals that may or may not pursue you. Typically, they're very different. A lot of people shoot these animals with AR-15s because of the capacity they have. If they just shot it with a shotgun or, let's say, a bolt-action rifle, they don't want to be left kind of screwed to the next reload if there's, turns out there's more out there than they thought they were. Very, very common. And they don't destroy the animal. Maybe I don't know. There are rounds out there, I'm sure, that will completely devastate an animal, but that's not something that
people carry around or anywhere near as common as the AR-15. The AR-15s are just, they're handy, right? They pop apart easy. They have high capacity, but the rounds aren't very heavy. They're lightweight, low recoil, good aim. They're just a convenient gun. It's not like it's not the deadliest round in the world. It's just, it's a rifle round. Rifle rounds do damage, but a lot of what's going on with people, using the AR-15s, even in construction or whatever, is that's just culture. It's a very popular. It's just like Glocks. They're synonymous. When you talk about a self-defense rifle, it's so popular in the United States. It's synonymous with self-defense rifle. People typically don't say, "Oh yeah, man, the guy came to my door and I grabbed my 30-06." They just don't typically say that. You're not. Maybe an AK-47 if you're that particular guy, like Brandon Herrera or something like that, which is nothing wrong. I like Brandon Herrera a lot, but it's just something to think about. Like, it's people are going to, like, if they're going to use a rifle, they're probably going to use AR-15 at this point. They used to use 22s a lot, but that's because it was some, I don't know, if not a crackhead, some degenerate stealing their grandpa's gun that they had by the bed for the last 20 years. Like, 22s were very, very, very common. Also, a lot of people got them as kids. So if you were a kid and you're already a good kid, you walked around, you were learning how to use your 22, and then you got older and you lost your marbles, or something happened to you, or you got hooked on something, you might grab that one. That's the 22 you had forever, never got rid of it. Now you're using it for robberies. Who knows? It's just life. These are different situations, but the stories over time, they make sense when you listen to them long enough. If you go back far enough, even though a lot of times what people do are irrational, it shouldn't be surprising. And that's the main thing you should understand. All right, thanks for tuning in, and peace.